mention anything about Paul and Islam. I've not seen him mentioned in the Quran, never seen him mentioned in any of the hadiths, but there's got to be beliefs, let's say, that Shabir Ali has about Paul. Could you just talk about that?
Yeah. Talking about Paul can get polemical. Sorry, I had to do it. See if any of you guys brought Rotten Tomatoes. Here's how Muslims generally interpret Paul. The Quran says in Surah Al-Imran that the disciples would be uppermost until the day of resurrection. So they believe that the disciples were good people, that the disciples actually followed Jesus. But at least Muslim apologists, and sometimes the average Muslim, realizes that very early on in Christian history, you had things being taught by Christians that are contradictory to Islam. You had the belief that Jesus is God. You have the belief that salvation only comes by accepting his blood on the cross. And so they have to say, well, somebody hijacked Christianity very early. Someone with a lot of power, someone who wasn't a disciple. And they pin that right on Paul. Must have been Paul who hijacked Christianity. We see that in Reza Aslan's book, Zealot. Some of you who've heard of that book that came out recently. And we do see that in some older scholarship. Western scholars did argue that for a short period of time till they realized that it didn't hold water. So that is how Muslims generally interpret Paul. Even though you're right, I don't think he's in the Quran, I don't think he's in the Hadith. That is how the average Muslim will handle the issue of Paul. Thanks.
Welcome back to Quarantine Apologetics, defending the faith while under lockdown. You've just seen the clip from Nabil Qureshi, where he talks about the Muslim view of Paul. Essentially, the Muslim view of Paul is, or at least amongst their apologists anyway, and probably some popular culture, is that he screwed everything up. There are multiple differences between Paul and the apostles, and Paul went out while the religion of the apostles, which was Islam, died off. So Paul's the fall guy. All the blame comes on Paul. And if you take the three biggest difference, the death, the resurrection, and the deity of Jesus Christ, Paul is to blame for all of them. Now, what's interesting about this whole episode is that this theory looks like it has some evidence on the surface. Like for example, there is friction in the Acts of the Apostle between St. Paul and the rest of the apostles. Ooh, are the Muslims onto something? Not quite, because when you read Acts of the Apostles and St. Paul's letters, you see that the friction is over the keeping of the law. When you read Galatians, when you read Acts, the friction comes with keeping the law. That's where it comes. It's not whether Jesus died and rose. They never argued that because they both agreed on that. They didn't argue the deity of Christ either. The only thing that they argued with was the law. And technically a Muslim doesn't really agree with either side because they don't keep the Mosaic law. They've got their own rules to follow, which, there's some overlap with the Mosaic law, but there's there's a lot of difference as well. The Muslims don't keep the Sabbath, don't celebrate Passover, etc. I did a video on this a while ago responding to Paul Williams, trying to say, oh yeah, we keep the law and Jesus won the... No, that's bait and switch, sleight of hand there. So, yeah, no, this is important. So something you should point out to the Muslim is that there is no conflict between Paul and the apostles about the core issues that Muslims and Christians debate. Only one issue that we never debate. So, yeah, so don't let them pull the Paul card on you because there's no evidence of that. And if they do bring it up, just say, okay, that's an interesting theory. Where's the proof? Anyway, stay healthy. God bless.